I am Melissa Waverly, a 31 years old woman. I'm a freelance interior designer in Portland, Oregon, and 6 months ago, I lost my mother after a long battle with pancreatic cancer. What happened after her will was read changed everything, and not just the way I saw my sister. It changed the way I saw myself. The last time I stepped into Kaplan and Bryce law offices, I was 17 and clinging to my dad's hand, watching him sign their divorce papers with eyes that looked like hollowed-out stone. Now, as I crossed the threshold alone, I could still smell the same tired leather chairs and stale air that clung to wood-paneled walls like a secret nobody dared speak out loud. It hit me like a memory soaked in vinegar. The receptionist, a woman in her late 60s with pink glasses and a voice like a dial tone, offered a polite nod and gestured toward the hallway. "They're ready for you, Ms. Waverly. Conference room 2. 2. Because of course room 1 was reserved for happier business, estate planning, prenuptials, mergers. Room 2 was for aftermath. My heels echoed against the polished hardwood floor as I passed framed photos of smiling lawyers shaking hands with happy clients. I paused outside the door and took a breath. Just one, shaky and thin, then I pushed it open. The room was colder than I remembered. Maybe it was the AC, maybe it was the company. Lindsay was already there. My sister sat in the high-backed leather chair across from the long walnut table, legs crossed, tablet open on her lap, stylus tapping lightly. She didn't look up. "Nice of you to show," she said. "I'm on time," I replied, settling into the chair beside her. 2 minutes late. Jesus, Lindsay. She finally looked at me then. Same piercing green eyes, same perfectly arched brows, same lipstick that always made her mouth look like a wound she chose to wear proudly. Before I could say more, the door opened and Harold Griffin entered, the executor, a man who looked like he was born inside a filing cabinet. He offered a brief nod. "Melissa, Lindsay, thank you for coming." He sat down, cleared his throat, opened the thick binder in front of him. "As you know, your mother, Eleanor Waverly, designated me as executor of her estate. The following is the reading of her last will and testament, dated March 19 of this year." Lindsay crossed her arms. I tried not to clench my jaw. Harold continued. "Upon her passing, her remaining assets include the family home, her retirement accounts, personal investments, and the Waverly Trust. The trust, originally established by both parents prior to divorce, was amended by Eleanor upon gaining sole control. These assets total approximately $800,000. He paused. The silence was like an inhale no one wanted to finish. "Per Eleanor's wishes," he said slowly, "Melissa Waverly is to receive $510,000 from the combined sale of the home and remaining trust assets. The remaining sum, approximately $290,000, is to be placed in a monthly disbursement account for Lindsay Waverly, managed by a financial trustee appointed independently of either party." The room stopped breathing. Lindsay's stylus froze midair. "I'm sorry, what?" she said, voice sharp. "It's all here," Harold said calmly, sliding a copy of the document across the table. "Your mother was very specific about the division. She believed it reflected each daughter's situation and need for support." Lindsay stood. Her chair scraped the floor like a scream. "This is bullshit." "Lindsay," I whispered. She turned on me, eyes wild. "You knew about this." "I didn't," I said, my voice cracking. "Don't lie to me, Melissa." "I didn't know." Her face twisted into something unrecognizable, something I hadn't seen since we were teenagers and she'd caught me reading her diary. Back then, she'd screamed for hours, then gone silent for days. "She wasn't in her right mind when she signed this," she snapped, jabbing a finger at the document. "You manipulated her, or someone did." This isn't her voice. "She was of sound mind," Harold said firmly. "There are signed physician statements, multiple witnesses." Lindsay didn't respond. She just picked up her tablet, stuffed it into her bag, and said one thing before storming out. "This isn't over." And just like that, the room emptied. But the cold lingered. I sat there long after Harold left, staring at the table like it might give me answers. How had this happened? Why would Mom, meticulous, emotionally diplomatic Mom, divide her estate this way? And why hadn't she told me? I didn't ask for this. I didn't want to win anything. I just wanted her to stay a little longer, to see my studio when I finally opened it, to see me become someone. The house was worth $600,000 at best. After taxes, the numbers would balance, but none of it mattered. Because my sister looked at me like I had stolen something sacred. 3 days later, the envelope came. Delivered by courier, hand-signed, urgent. I opened it with trembling hands, sitting cross-legged on the floor of my apartment, still in pajamas, hair tangled from a night of sleepless grief. It was from Lindsay's attorney. A formal contestation of the will. But not just that. The letter claimed that I, Melissa Waverly, was mentally unfit to receive or manage a lump sum inheritance. They cited anxiety diagnoses, grief-induced instability, long-term emotional distress. They were asking the court for a psychiatric evaluation. My breath left me. Everything blurred. How could she do this? How could she take the softest parts of me, the pieces I'd fought so hard to hold together, and use them as weapons? I called Rebecca Klein the next day. I remembered her from a design consultation years ago. Her wife had wanted an Art Deco home office. She didn't hire me, but I remembered her confidence, the kind that didn't shake. Rebecca listened without interrupting. Then she said, "She's coming for your sanity because it's the only place she can strike without touching the truth." What do I do? You fight back. And that was the moment it began, not the legal battle. The becoming. The moment I stopped being the quiet one, the peacekeeper, the sister who said it's okay. Because this time it was. And I wasn't going to let her write the ending. Not this time. The day Rebecca filed the counter-motion, the air in Portland felt different. Not like justice, not yet, more like a storm waiting behind a locked door. She was fast, efficient, unapologetic. Everything I wasn't, which made her the perfect person to speak for me in court. But no matter how many times she reassured me we were on solid ground, that Lindsay's claims were a shot in the dark hopping to hit something tender, I couldn't breathe easy. Not until I knew how far Lindsay was willing to go. And the answer came sooner than expected. 2 weeks later, Rebecca called. "You need to see something," she said. When I arrived at her office, she handed me a stack of documents, glossy copies, highlighted margins, and one letterhead that turned my stomach inside out. Dr. Naomi Rios, LMFT. My former therapist. We hadn't spoken in almost 3 years. She'd helped me through the worst stretch of Mom's decline when I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't make eye contact with myself in the mirror. Dr. Rios had seen me stripped bare. And now, somehow, my sister had got her hands on that part of me. The report claimed I had ongoing anxiety, difficulty managing prolonged grief, and a history of dissociation under stress. My throat tightened. "Lindsay submitted this with her claim?" I asked, the words barely audible. Rebecca nodded grimly. "It's a copy, not an official release, no direct signature from Dr. Rios, but the implication is strong enough. She's trying to build a case that your judgment is compromised. If we don't challenge this head-on, the court could grant a psychiatric review." My hands were shaking. "She's not just attacking my credibility," I whispered. "She's erasing me." Rebecca leaned forward. "Then we fight with facts. You said you never signed a release." "Never." "Then let's find out who did." That night, I sat in my apartment with the lights off, the city humming quietly outside my window. The therapist's letter lay on my kitchen table, glowing softly beneath the under-cabinet light. And I remembered something, a moment from weeks before Mom passed. Lindsay was sorting through drawers, boxes, random piles of papers, claiming she was organizing documents. I didn't think much of it then. We were all trying to feel useful. But now, I wondered what she took. I picked up the phone and called Dr. Rios. She answered on the second ring. "Melissa," she said, surprised. "I need to ask you something," I said. "Did you give Lindsay access to my file?" A pause. "No, of course not. She submitted a summary to the court. It has your name on it." Silence. "Then someone requested your records last month. A woman claimed to have power of attorney, signed by your mother." My heart stopped. My mother was barely conscious at that point. I thought it was strange, but the notary stamp was legitimate. I'm so sorry, Melissa. My voice was trembling. Can you send me a copy of the request? Of course. An hour later, I had it in my inbox. And the signature on the document. It looked like my mother. But it was. It was careful, shaky, forged. I would have known that L anywhere. My mom, L always looped backward. This one looped forwards like Lindsay. Rebecca called the next morning. I have someone who can help, she said. A handwriting analyst. He's worked with fraud cases before. If we can prove forgery, we can not only strike the therapist notes from evidence, we can open a counterclaim for manipulation and potential document fraud. But my mind wasn't on strategy. It was on rage. It was on pain. It was on that girl I used to be, scribbling my feelings in a therapy journal, thinking I was safe, never imagining my own sister would weaponize the version of me I was trying to heal. I didn't cry that night. I paced for hours around the kitchen, into the hallway, back again. Until I remembered something. A conversation with Mom, weeks before she died. She'd been drifting in and out of sleep, and I was sitting on the edge of her bed, brushing her hair. Your sister's been asking about the will, she said suddenly, and about your records. What records? I asked, startled. Your therapy, she murmured. She said she wanted to understand you better. Back then I thought it was concern. Now I knew better. I was a threat. Not because I was unstable, but because I was finally standing up straight. The handwriting analyst confirmed our suspicion. The signature wasn't my mother. And the notary, a freelance assistant who had once worked with Charles Grant, our parents' old real estate friend who had been circling Lindsay like a vulture since Mom got sick. Rebecca was furious. She's setting fire to ethics, she said. We're filing immediately for discovery and requesting a full audit of any and all legal documents Lindsay's team submitted. But before we could act, something else happened. Dr. Rias's office was broken into. The receptionist called me in a panic. Melissa, someone forced the back door. The only file missing was yours. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. This was a calculated erasure of my voice, my records, my truth. And there was only one person who stood to gain from making me look broken. I drove to Mom's house that night, the one we'd sold but hadn't cleared out yet. The buyer was giving us grace through probate. The power was still on. The house smelled like dust and rosewater. I walked through it slowly, room by room, until I got to the attic. She'd always said, if anything ever gets messy, the truth lives up high. I pulled down the ladder and climbed, the wood creaking beneath me. And in the far corner beneath a sheet was a navy blue box, tied with ribbon. Inside, her backup records, scanned copies, notes, a second copy of the will, dated, notarized, and a letter. Melissa, if Lindsay fights you, don't back down. I gave you more not because I loved you more, but because I trusted you more. You've always seen the world clearly, even when it hurt. Use this only when you're ready to tell the truth, no matter what it costs. I sat in the attic and let the tears come. Because for the first time in weeks, I wasn't gaslighting myself. She had trusted me. And that was all the permission I needed to stop hiding. The box was heavier than it looked. I cradled it in both arms as I descended the attic ladder, careful not to let the corners knock the walls. Each step down creaked beneath my weight, but the sound felt less like a warning and more like a quiet applause. As if the house itself knew I had finally found what I'd been searching for. Truth. Mom's truth. My hands trembled as I placed the navy blue box on the dining table. I didn't rush to open it again, not this time. Instead, I stood there a moment, fingers resting on the soft, worn ribbon that held everything together. The silence was loud, the kind of silence that used to make me feel hollow. Now it made me feel whole. When I finally untied the bow, I moved with reverence. Like each piece of paper was a lifeline she'd left behind, not because she thought I'd need them, but because she knew I would. At the top of the stack was her letter, the one I'd already read in the attic, but below it, tucked inside a clear folder, was the second signed version of the will. The ink was crisp, her signature was familiar, but what caught my eye were the margins. scribbled notes, words in her own hand. Make sure Melissa knows this was my choice, not hers, not anyone's. Next to that, a yellow sticky note. Charles is too close to Lindsay, be careful. I sat down, laid it all out. A map of betrayal and foresight. There were financial records too, detailed and precise, showing her revised trust documents, physician declarations of her mental capacity, even video transcripts where she discussed her reasoning with a legal witness. Mom hadn't just left a will. She left a defense plan. A legacy safeguarded in shadows. And that's when I realized this wasn't just a fight over money, it was a test, a final, brutal test of who we'd become, and I wasn't going to fail. Not this time. The next morning, I took the documents straight to Rebecca. Her eyes widened as she flipped through the pages. This is gold, she whispered. It's everything we need. This could bury their claim before it reaches a judge. She looked up at me, eyes fierce. Do you understand what this means? Yes, I said quietly. It means my mother knew who my sister was, and she trusted me to protect what mattered. We'll file a protective injunction immediately, Rebecca continued. Court-verified proof of forgery. This invalidates their claim. We'll use the physician's testimony, the financial timeline, and her handwritten notes. Lindsay's entire narrative falls apart. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt too sad. Because even with all this ammunition, there was no joy in winning a war against my sister. Only exhaustion. Only loss. A few days later, while scanning the documents to a private drive, I received a notification. Unusual login attempt, IP address traced to a nearby city. I froze. Lindsay. She had tried to access my cloud. She was still reaching. Still clawing. Still convinced she could twist this story if she just found the right string to pull. I changed every password. Enabled every lock. And then I printed hard copies of everything and put them in a fireproof safe I bought that night with the last of my emergency savings. If she wanted to burn me down again, she'd have to light herself on fire first. The next turning point came unexpectedly. I was at the grocery store when my phone buzzed with a restricted number. I nearly ignored it. But something told me to answer. Hello. A pause. Then a soft shaking voice. Melissa, it's Julia from hospice. I stopped mid-aisle. Julia, oh my God, hi, is everything okay? She hesitated. I got a call from someone asking questions about your mom, about her mental state. They said they were doing independent probate verification. It felt wrong. My stomach dropped. Did they give a name? No, but the number traced back to a private legal investigator. I thought you should know. I nodded even though she couldn't see it. Thank you, Julia, seriously. Your mom trusted you, Melissa, don't forget that. After the call, I leaned against the freezer section, trying to breathe. The world felt like it had tilted slightly again, like truth wasn't enough to anchor me unless I was vigilant. Back at home, I texted Rebecca. She replied within minutes. We move now, file everything, submit the witness list, I'll call Vaughn, we're not waiting anymore. That night, I sat in my bedroom, surrounded by flickering candles and the soft whir of my old box fan. I opened Mom's journal one last time. There, on the final page, written in the same tired script I remembered from her last months, were the words that broke me. If they fight after I'm gone, remind them they were born of the same ache, and that nothing will poison them faster than forgetting it. The ache. The wound we both carried, Lindsay and me. The invisible bruises passed from mother to daughter, masked in ambition, weaponized in silence. I realized in that moment that this battle, this inheritance, this fight, it was never about $510,000. It was about identity, validation, love, and the terrifying question of what happens when a mother loves two daughters unequally, not in volume but in trust. The next morning, I walked into Rebecca's office with the entire file in hand. Original will, handwritten notes, journal entries, notarized backup. She looked at me. What's your intention here, Melissa? Are we going for full injunction? Do you want her held accountable? I didn't hesitate. I want the truth entered into court. I want the forgery exposed. And I want every single record she touched to be brought into the light. And Lindsay. I want the court to see her, fully, clearly. I don't need revenge, I just need the truth to finally outshine the lie. Rebecca nodded slowly. Then she reached for her phone. We filed today. The court date was looming. Rebecca was building our case like a surgeon, steady hands, sharp incisions. She told me we had everything we needed: the verified will, the handwriting analysis, digital metadata, signed witness declarations. But I knew we were missing one thing. A voice. Not mine, not my mother's. Someone outside the emotional fire, someone who had been there when Mom was fatting, when Lindsay was circling, when the house was soaked in morphine and half-whispered goodbyes. I needed Julia Pena. Her voice haunted my memories, the calm clarity with which she would say things like, "Today's a low-energy day," or "She's still coherent, just quiet." Julia didn't speak often, but when she did, people listened. And my mother trusted her. So I drove across town, heart pounding in my chest, unsure of what I was even going to say. Julia lived in a modest apartment above a florist. When she opened the door, I was stunned by how unchanged she looked. Same neat ponytail, same deep, patient eyes. She blinked once when she saw me. "I was wondering when you'd come," she said softly. She invited me inside, motioning to a small table covered with tea mugs and puzzle pieces. There was a warmth here that made my throat tight. "I won't waste your time," I began, sitting carefully. "My sister is claiming I'm mentally unfit. She forged records. She tried to rewrite the will. We have evidence, but what we need is you." Julia didn't flinch. She got up without a word and returned with a leather-bound notebook. "I kept a journal of your mother's care," she said. "It's not official, not for work, just my way of honoring those I watch leave." She opened to a marked page and read aloud. "March 18, Alina dictated a letter today. She said, if anything happens, Melissa is the one I trust. Lindsay doesn't see me, she only sees the money. I told her to record it. She said, I don't have the strength, this is enough." I felt tears rise before I could stop them. "She said that?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "She said a lot, every night before she slept." Julia slid the notebook toward me. "I wrote it down so someone could remember if you needed to prove she was lucid. And not just lucid, deliberate." I looked at her then, this quiet nurse who had sat beside my mother while I ran errands or held it together in other rooms. "You saw more than anyone," I said. Julia nodded, and I saw Lindsay too. That made me pause. "What did you see?" "She came late one night. You had gone home to sleep. I was in the hall, folding linens. She was whispering to your mom, pressuring her, saying she'd take care of it and fix the will before it was too late. Your mother didn't respond, but she didn't smile either." That night came back to me in fragments, a voicemail I didn't return, a call I missed. "Would you testify?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "I will," she said, "but not for you, for her, because Alina wanted this story told. And I think she always knew her daughters would have to tell it themselves one way or another." Rebecca was stunned when I told her. "You got the hospice nurse?" she asked, eyes wide. "She kept a journal." Rebecca whistled. "That's gold, we're adding her to the witness list today." And that's when it started, the unraveling. Within 24 hours of Julia's name being submitted, Lindsay's attorney filed an emergency motion to suppress new evidence. Their argument? Undue emotional influence and irrelevant testimonial weight. Rebecca laughed when she read it. "They're scared." That night, I got home to find a note slid under my front door. Just a photo. Me and Lindsay as kids. And on the back in red ink, "Blood doesn't forget." I sat down on the floor, knees folded under me, and stared at it. She was watching me. Still. I could feel her, not physically but emotionally. That restless, simmering presence that had once been a sibling and was now something colder. Not a villain, not a monster, but a woman so afraid of being left behind that she tried to rewrite the world around her. I texted Rebecca a photo of the message. She replied instantly. "Now it's harassment, we'll file protective measures, don't engage." But I didn't sleep that night. I kept hearing Julia's voice. She only sees the money. In Mom, I trust you. And somewhere between those truths, I found clarity. This wasn't just about court. This was about legacy, about memory, about the truth standing tall even when love couldn't. The morning of Julia's testimony, the courtroom felt smaller than usual, more intimate, like a theater before the curtain rises. Julia walked in calmly, hair pulled back, notebook in hand. She was sworn in and took the stand with quiet dignity. And then she spoke. Of my mother's clarity. Her final weeks. The way she spoke with purpose, even when her body was failing. She trusted Melissa, Julia said simply, and she feared Lindsay. There was no malice in her tone. Just truth. And the room held its breath. When Rebecca asked if Julia believed Alina was in sound mind when she revised the will, she answered without hesitation. Yes, and she was relieved afterward, like she finally did something she'd been afraid to do for years. I closed my eyes and let the weight of those words sink in. When cross-examination came, Lindsay's lawyer tried to poke holes, but Julia held fast. I have no personal investment in this, she said. I'm not family, I'm not paid, I'm just the woman who held her hand when no one else was looking. That shut them down. Outside the courthouse, reporters were starting to sniff around. One tried to shove a microphone in my face. Melissa, do you have a comment about the contested will? I looked straight into the lens and said, the only thing I inherited was the truth, and I plan to protect it. After Julia's testimony, the silence on Lindsay's side said everything. They were panicking. You could feel it not just in the court filings or the legal maneuvering, but in the subtle shifts of tone in every letter her lawyer sent. They went from accusatory to vague, from confident to evasive. Rebecca saw it too. We've got them on their heels, she said, packing her office. Now we press. I sat across from her, sipping coffee that had long gone cold, trying to ignore the gnawing ache in my stomach. Winning wasn't euphoria, it was nausea wrapped in determination. What's the next move? I asked. She stopped packing and tapped a manila folder on her desk. We set a trap. And then she laid it all out. It started with a subpoena, a clean, quiet one. We requested access to any and all communications between Lindsay and Charles Grant, the so-called family advisor who had suddenly vanished from the scene once the forgery was exposed. We knew Charles wasn't acting alone. But what Rebecca wanted was proof that he and Lindsay weren't just collaborating. She wanted to show that Lindsay had directed the fraud. Intent is everything, she said. We don't just want to prove she benefited, we want to prove she engineered this. So we baited them. We filed a motion to introduce additional evidence, but not all of it. We intentionally left out key parts of the attic documents and withheld Julia's original journal for now. Enough to make them sweat, but not enough to show our full hand. Then we waited. And sure enough, they panicked. 2 days before the evidentiary hearing, Lindsay's attorney filed a motion to strike new witness declarations, claiming they were tainted by emotional bias and not contemporaneous to the events in question. It was an unusual move, defensive, rushed. They were trying to contain a fire without knowing where the sparks were coming from. And that's when Rebecca made the call. We drop everything, every document, every recording, every login trace. We flood the court with truth. That morning, the courtroom felt like a pressure cooker. I wore a navy suit. Hair pinned back. No makeup, just clean, open skin. I didn't want to perform, I just wanted to be. Lindsay sat across the aisle, jaw tight, eyes hollow. Her lawyer whispered in her ear, but she wasn't listening. Charles Grant was nowhere to be seen. But I knew where he was because Vaughn, our private investigator, had followed him. Turns out Charles had been quietly meeting with a woman named Sylvia Rayner, a paralegal disbarred 5 years ago for forging real estate contracts under pressure from wealthy clients. She wasn't just a rogue player. She was the notary who stamped my mother's forged power of attorney. And Vaughn had a photo of her and Charles walking out of a diner 2 weeks before Lindsay submitted the forged documents. Rebecca submitted it into evidence just before the hearing. As the judge reviewed our filings, the room was silent. I watched Lindsay fidget, Her fingers tapped her knee in a steady, frantic rhythm, something she used to do as a child during piano recitals. Back then it was nerves. Now it was guilt. Judge Rosenthal finally looked up. "Ms. Waverly," he said, addressing Lindsay, "do you have any response to the evidence submitted?" Lindsay's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, we intend to file a motion to suppress these materials based on." He didn't finish, because Rebecca interrupted. "Your Honor, we also have a statement from Charles Grant. Signed, sworn. He has admitted under oath that he acted under the direction of Lindsay Waverly with full knowledge that her mother had revoked the prior power of attorney." Gasps rippled across the room. My breath caught. Lindsay's face, it didn't crumble, it didn't break. It just froze like a mask she'd been wearing had finally turned to porcelain. Beautiful, fragile, breakable. The judge sighed, then leaned forward. "I have reviewed the documents, the affidavits, and the timeline. It is clear to the court that material fraud was attempted, and that the true and legally binding version of Eleanor Waverly's last will and testament is the one submitted by Melissa Waverly, as supported by multiple sources of independent verification." Rebecca leaned toward me. "It's done." After court adjourned, I didn't speak to Lindsay. She stood in the hallway outside, flanked by her lawyer, blinking like someone waking from a dream. I walked past her slowly, and just before the elevator doors closed, I looked back. She was staring straight at me, but not with anger, with something quieter. Shame, maybe even grief. And I realized in that moment, I wasn't just walking away with the inheritance. I was walking away with the truth she'd tried to bury. We won. The will was upheld. The forged documents were formally struck from the record. Charles was indicted for fraud, and the court awarded me full control over my mother's estate, including the remaining trust assigned to Lindsay. That's when Rebecca called with one final piece of news. "The court is offering you something unexpected," she said. I blinked. "What?" "Temporary financial guardianship over Lindsay's trust." I laughed. "She didn't." "I'm serious. Because of the mental health claims, her lack of court compliance, and the fraud, the court doesn't believe she can manage the disbursements herself right now. They want a neutral party. They trust you." The irony was suffocating. The woman who tried to have me declared mentally unfit was now under my supervision. "I don't want revenge," I said slowly, "and I don't want control." Rebecca waited. "But I'll take the guardianship," I added, "because I won't let her destroy herself with the very thing she tried to steal." That night I sat on my balcony, Portland lights stretching out like fireflies. Mom's journals were stacked beside me. The legal battle was over. But the ache, it lingered. Not sharp, not burning, just present. A sister-shaped bruise I wasn't sure would ever fade. But I didn't need it to. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying it alone. The truth was holding it with me. And that finally was enough. The letter came 3 days after the ruling. No return address, no stamp, just a plain white envelope left under my doormat, folded in half like it didn't deserve the weight of formality. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside, one photo. Me and Lindsay. I was maybe 9, she was 7. We were sitting on the old tire swing in Mom's backyard, knees touching, cheeks freckled from sun, arms tangled around each other like we couldn't imagine the world without one another in it. I remembered that day vividly, not because anything dramatic happened, but because of what we promised each other behind the garage that afternoon. We called it the pact. It started after she got caught stealing $5 from Mom's purse. She blamed the babysitter quit. Mom grounded us both until someone confessed. Lindsay cried, begged, and in the end, I lied for her. Later, behind the garage, she hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "I'll owe you forever," she whispered. "We'll always be on the same side, no matter what." We spit in our hands and shook on it like blood sisters. I kept that pact. For years. Through every fight, every lie, every favor. Even when she dated my college ex and pretended it was innocent. even when she ignored every hospital shift while mom was dying and showed up only for the lawyer meetings. I kept the pact because I thought loyalty was love. But now, as I held the photo with trembling hands, I finally saw it for what it was. A contract I never signed, not truly because I'd been a child. And Lindsay had never stopped making me pay interest on it. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed replaying every moment I ever forgave her too quickly. And I realized something even harder to swallow. She wasn't the only one who betrayed me. I betrayed myself too. By staying quiet. By keeping peace. By twisting myself into something palatable just so I wouldn't be abandoned. The next morning I went back to Mom's house. Not to grieve. Not to remember. To pack. The probate window was closed, the court had awarded me final control, and the buyers were ready to move in within the month. I hadn't touched her room in nearly a year. The air was stale. Her perfume still lived in the closet like a ghost refusing to move on. I opened every drawer. Held every scarf to my face like it could breathe her back into me. And then in the bottom of her jewelry box, I found a folded note. My name on the front. Inside, her handwriting, faint but still hers. If you're reading this, it means things went sideways. I don't know what she did, but I know you'll want to forgive her even when it nearly kills you. So let me say what you won't. You don't owe her anything. You owe yourself peace. That's the only inheritance that matters. I fell to my knees on the floor, holding that note to my chest as the grief finally came, not for her, not for Lindsay. For me. For the years I lost being small for someone else's comfort. Rebecca came by later that evening to finalize some paperwork. She found me sitting on the kitchen floor, surrounded by boxes. She didn't ask if I was okay. She knew. I got a call, she said softly. Lindsay's lawyer is withdrawing completely, no statement. I blinked, so she's just gone. Rebecca shrugged. I think this was the end for her. You didn't just win in court, Melissa. You took away the last illusion she had that she could control the narrative. I nodded slowly. I thought it would feel better than this. It never does. We sat in silence for a while. Then she handed me a manila folder. What's this? I asked. Something extra. The DA is pressing charges on Charles Grant. They're offering you the chance to submit a statement for sentencing. I hesitated, then shook my head. I don't want vengeance. I figured you'd say that. But I'll write something, I added, not for him, for me. That night I opened my laptop and typed slowly. A letter to the state. To the court. To the version of myself that still thought kindness was weakness. I wrote, forgiveness is not forgetting, it's remembering without fear. I do not need Charles Grant to suffer for me to heal. I only need to know that the next daughter, the next sister, the next woman won't have her voice stolen in a folder marked unstable. Let this serve as a reminder that truth doesn't whisper forever. Eventually it screams, and when it does, I hope the walls listen. 3 weeks later, I received an update. Lindsay had checked into a private rehabilitation and trauma facility. Voluntarily. No court order. No PR spin. Just gone. I don't know how she found her way there. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was collapse. Maybe she finally saw herself clearly in the mirror and didn't look away. But I didn't send flowers. Didn't call. Didn't reach out. I let silence do what words never could. On the day I turned 32, I drove to the coast. Alone. Not lonely. Just me. I walked barefoot along Cannon Beach, wind tearing through my coat, eyes stinging from salt and sunlight. And I scattered a handful of dried lavender, Mom's favorite, into the waves. Not because I needed closure, but because I finally understood what she meant when she said, you don't always get to choose your family, but you do get to choose your freedom. I whispered, I choose mine. And for the first time in my life, I meant it. The day the judge finalized the ruling, Portland was blanketed in a low mist that clung to the treetops like unfinished thoughts. It wasn't raining, not quite, but the kind of drizzle that sinks into your collar before you realize you're soaked. It felt fitting. Like the city was quietly mourning what had been lost, or maybe clearing space for what was about to come. Rebecca met me on the courthouse steps. She was in gray today, slate suit, black umbrella, heels that didn't flinch against the slick concrete. She gave me one look and said, "You ready?" I nodded, but I wasn't sure what ready meant anymore. Inside the courtroom, everything looked the same cherrywood benches, same dull brass fixtures, same smell of anxiety and wet paper. But something had shifted. This wasn't the beginning of the war anymore. It was the reckoning. Lindsay wasn't there. No apology, no final protest, just silence. Instead, her lawyer sat stiffly at the opposite table, hands folded like a child waiting for punishment. Judge Rosenthal entered with his usual slow gait, robe billowing slightly behind him. He didn't waste time. He flipped through the final documents, tapped his pen once against the wood, then looked directly at me. "Ms. Waverly," he said, "the court has reviewed all submitted evidence, including the corroborated will, the expert testimony, the fraudulent filings, and the subsequent criminal charges brought against Mr. Charles Grant. It is the determination of this court that you, and only you, are the rightful beneficiary of the $510,000 inheritance, the executor of Eleanor Waverly's estate, and the sole trustee of the remaining disbursement funds originally intended for Ms. Lindsay Waverly." I didn't move. Not because I was trying to stay composed. Because I was too stunned. The final nail. The final word. Then he added, "This court has also reviewed the behavioral patterns and prolonged legal disruptions caused by Ms. Lindsay Waverly. Given her current status and failure to appear, the court is transferring full fiduciary responsibility of her monthly trust to you, Ms. Waverly, with supervision from the Financial Court Review Board." I blinked. Twice. Wait. Did I just hear what I thought I heard? Rebecca leaned over. "You're in charge of her trust now," she whispered. "Temporarily, it's a provisional guardianship, but it's power." Power. The same power she tried to use to erase me. Now in my hands. After the gavel came down, I stood in the hallway for a long time. Rebecca offered to walk me out. I told her I needed a moment. She nodded and said the kindest thing anyone had said in months. "You didn't just win, Melissa, you survived, that matters more." Then she left. And I stood there. In the corridor where my sister had once hissed, "This isn't over." And now, there was no voice echoing behind me. No footstep chasing mine. Only the sound of my own heels as I walked forward, this time not flinching. Back home, I opened the file labeled, "Waverly Estate Final." I scrolled past the declarations, the court's ruling, the criminal recommendations for Charles, and then I saw the section I hadn't read yet. Court-appointed trustee guidelines, Lindsay Waverly. My name filled every page. Me, the steward of the very thing she used as a weapon. The irony wasn't lost on me. She tried to have me declared unstable, unfit, and now the state had handed me control of her financial safety net. It wasn't justice. Not really. It was something colder. Something more intimate. A mirror. A reminder of what power really was, and how easily it corrodes when you try to own what was never yours to take. I didn't tell anyone about the guardianship at first. Not friends. Not even Julia. It felt too big, too surreal, like something sacred and sad at the same time. I just sat with it. Let it breathe. Let me breathe. And then a week later, I got a letter. Typed, "No return address. I heard you took the trust. I thought you'd destroy it. You didn't. That's something. I'm not asking for anything, but thank you, L. No manipulation. No demands. Just acknowledgement." And somehow, it hurt more than the threats ever did. I spoke to my therapist the next day. Marlene. Kind eyes, no judgment, voice like warm stone. "You get to define what you do with the power now," she said, "but make sure you're doing it from choice, not trauma." "Is it wrong if I feel nothing?" I asked. Not happy, not sad, just hollow. "No," she said, "that's the echo, it gets quieter." The next few weeks passed like fog rolling off the hills, slow, shapeless, but always in motion. I started organizing the documents. Set up quarterly audits. Structure the disbursements. made it airtight. There was no part of me left that wanted control, only order, only fairness. But the truth, what I really wanted was rest. Not the sleep kind. The soul kind. The kind where you finally stop apologizing to yourself for surviving. The night before the first trust disbursement was due, I did something strange. I lit a candle in the kitchen, one of Mom's old beeswax ones I found in the back of a drawer. I took out a blank piece of paper, and I wrote a note. To Lindsay. But I didn't send it. I folded it into a tiny square and placed it inside the candle holder. I will protect what you tried to destroy, not for you, for me, because I need to know I didn't become what you said I was. The wax melted over it slowly, sealing it in. Not forgiveness. Not rage. Just truth. And truth, I was learning, is enough. It was a Thursday. Not the kind of Thursday you remember for anything, just a plain, overcast weekday. I was folding laundry, my cat curled up on the windowsill, a soft indie playlist echoing from the speaker. And then my phone rang. Unknown number. My stomach tightened, not out of fear, not even dread. Something else. Like a ghost was reaching across the static to knock on my door. I almost didn't answer. But something, maybe intuition, maybe closure, told me to press accept. I lifted the phone to my ear and didn't speak. Melissa. Her voice cracked like an old record. I didn't respond. I'm not calling to start anything, she said quickly. You don't have to talk if you don't want to. I waited. And then said, where are you? She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for months. St. Margaret's. I sat down on the edge of the kitchen chair. Voluntarily checking yourself into a long-term psychiatric and trauma care facility wasn't something Lindsay would have done a year ago. Hell, it wasn't something she would have done 3 months ago. But now, she was there. Not because she lost. Because she broke. I've been here 4 weeks, she said. No mirrors, no outside contact. They make us write letters we don't send, burn things we want to hold, talk about people we swore we'd never talk about. And now you're talking to me, I said quietly. I asked for this call, they said I had to explain why. And what did you say? I said I wanted to tell the only person who still had a piece of me left that I'm trying. I closed my eyes. Felt tears threaten behind the lids, not for her, but for all the versions of us who'd ever tried to meet each other in the dark and failed. She continued. They said I have to face what I broke, what I manipulated, what I used to cope, and most of that was you. I swallowed hard. I'm not calling for forgiveness, she added. I didn't want to be a shadow anymore. The line was quiet for a long time. Then I asked, are you sober? 52 days. Therapy. Every day. Do you think you'll ever come back? I don't know, but if I do, I won't ask to be your sister again, just a person you can look at without flinching. That's when I cried. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But gently. Soft tears that slid down my cheeks like they were apologizing for taking up space. I whispered, thank you for calling. I didn't think you answer, she said. Neither did I. We hung up not long after that. No promises. No plans. Just silence. And for the first time, it didn't hurt. Later that night, I sat in my studio and pulled out the sketchbook I hadn't touched since Mom died. I flipped to a fresh page and drew the tire swing from our backyard, the one from the photo Lindsay left me. 2 girls tangled in a moment, unaware that time would split them open. Then I wrote under it. We were both made of longing, only I didn't try to steal it. I closed the book. Lit a candle. And for the first time in years, I slept. No dreams. No ghosts. Just breath. The next morning, I checked my email and found one from Rebecca. Subject line closure. Inside was an attachment, a formal release document from the court. Lindsay's trust would remain under my control until she filed a restoration motion, which, based on her current situation, wasn't expected for at least another year. I was given the option to decline. To pass control to the court or a neutral party. I stared at the line for a long time. Would you like to retain guardianship of Lindsay Waverly's trust? I didn't hesitate. I clicked yes. Not because I needed to protect her, but because I needed to protect the girl in me who once made a pact behind the garage. The one who promised she'd never turn into someone else just to be safe. That afternoon, I took a walk through Laurelhurst Park. It smelled like wet earth and lemon blossoms. The benches were still damp. Children laughed somewhere in the distance. I watched a woman sketching a bridge, her hands stained with charcoal. She looked like peace. Like the kind of artist I used to want to be before all of this. And in that moment I realized, I still could. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But eventually. On the way home, I bought a bottle of wine and a new candle, pine and bergamot. Then I opened a fresh document on my laptop and began to write. Not a legal brief. Not a statement. A book. Title: Inheritance. Not about money. Not even about family. About truth. About what we carry, what we let go, what we rewrite, not because we erase the past, but because we finally understand it. 3 months after the ruling, I stood in front of the mirror in my newly rented apartment, brushing my teeth with the bathroom door open, humming some mindless indie tune I'd heard in a coffee shop. It wasn't glamorous. The walls were still mostly bare. My books were in a stack on the floor. I hadn't bought new furniture, not because I couldn't afford it, but because I didn't want to fill my space with things too quickly. I needed to hear myself think again. To let the silence breathe without trying to muffle it with noise. That morning felt different, not like a new beginning, but like an echo fading out at last. The sun streamed in through the curtains and I realized. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of Lindsay. Not of losing control. Not of being seen. I started small. A walk each morning, sometimes barefoot in my backyard, dew soaking my heels as the grass whispered against my ankles. I lit candles in rooms I used to keep dark. Opened windows I'd long kept shut. Deleted old voicemails without listening. Blocked numbers I used to leave open just in case. I created rituals for myself, a slow pour-over coffee with a cracked mug Mom used to use, incense every Sunday night, piano music when I couldn't sleep. No one told me how exhausting healing would be. How quiet it could get. How ugly and beautiful it would feel at the same time. I wasn't working yet. Not officially. My design clients had all moved on, which was fine. I wasn't sure I could build kitchens and closet systems while still unpacking the clutter inside my own chest. Instead, I painted. Nothing structured. Just colors, shapes, wounds turned into brushstrokes. One afternoon, while walking near the East Bank Esplanade, I saw a community board flyer calling for volunteers to paint a mural on the side of a trauma recovery center. It was Lindsay's center. The one from her last letter. I stared at it for a long time. Then I pulled the tab with the contact info. Not because I was ready to see her again, but because I wanted to see what she built with the pieces she hadn't burned. The coordinator's name was Dell. She greeted me with paint on her sleeves and a no-nonsense warmth that reminded me of my high school art teacher. "You're Melissa?" she asked. "Yes. Lindsay's sister." My heart clenched. That's me. Dell didn't judge me. Didn't ask questions. She just handed me a brush and said, "This wall is grief. It goes here," she pointed, between anger and forgiveness. I stared at the blank panel, its surface slightly cracked. And for the next 5 hours I painted. Tears mixed with the paint sometimes. No one asked why. It didn't matter. That wall wasn't about beauty. It was about becoming. Later that week, I received another letter from Lindsay. A drawing this time. 2 women, one on each side of a cracked wall, both holding pieces of gold, pressing them into the fracture. On the back she'd written, "We didn't fix it, but we stopped pretending it wasn't broken." I didn't reply, but I pinned it to the fridge. Not as an invitation. As a reminder. When the first trust review came up, I submitted the reports early, clean, transparent. I listed every transaction, every projected allocation, every resource offered to Lindsay through the court. Rebecca called after the paperwork cleared. "They're impressed," she said. "You could transfer the guardianship to a court administrator if you want. You've more than fulfilled your obligation." I looked out the window at the sky streaked with amber. "No," I said. "You want to keep it. I want to keep her safe. Even if she never knew. Even if she never said thank you. Even if this was the only way we'd ever exist beside each other again." I started speaking at small gatherings. Estate planning seminars, trauma support groups, legal aid workshops for women navigating family betrayal. I told them what no one had told me. That your story is still yours even when it's torn apart. That justice is not a finish line, it's a mirror. That sometimes, peace means letting go of what you should be able to fix. And one evening, in a dimly lit room full of strangers who nodded silently as I spoke, I said the scariest truth of all. She didn't ruin me, she revealed me, and for that I don't hate her anymore. Someone cried in the back row. So did I. I still get the letters. Lindsay writes them monthly now. No requests. No pity. Just updates. Sometimes she writes about her therapy breakthroughs, her sobriety milestones, the women she meets in group sessions. Sometimes she writes about dreams we had as kids, the ones we buried in the noise. I don't respond. Not because I'm cruel, but because this space between us. It's sacred. It's the truce we didn't know how to name. It's the soft, scarred silence between survival and surrender. And me. I'm okay. Not perfect, not healed all the way. But okay. I'm rebuilding. Designing again. Not just rooms, but boundaries. Homes that feel like they breathe. Clients who want soul in their space, not just style. I teach now too, design students, mostly women. We talk about architecture, sure, but also about legacy, agency, identity. I tell them, you are allowed to build something that no one else understands. If it's honest, it's worth it. And I believe it. For the first time, I believe it. It was a Tuesday morning when it arrived. Rain slid gently down the window glass. My inbox was mostly junk, newsletters I never read, appointment reminders, shipping confirmations for things I forgot I ordered. And then there it was. A scanned envelope. From St. Margaret's Recovery Center. To Melissa Waverly. Subject line, final letter. I stared at it for a full minute before clicking. The attached PDF opened slowly. Inside were 3 pages, handwritten in a blue ink I instantly recognized, sharp and fast and a little messy. Lindsay's handwriting always looked like it was trying to outrun itself. The first line. This will be the last one. I sat down, pressed my bare feet into the hardwood floor. And read. Melissa. I won't send more after this, not because I'm giving up, but because I finally understand what boundaries really are, not walls, not punishments, just space, and you're allowed to have yours. I used to think if I could just say the right words, cry the right tears, confess the right sins, you'd come back. Not just as my sister, but as the version of you who would still protect me even when I didn't deserve it. But that's not fair. And I'm not writing to ask for your forgiveness anymore. I'm writing to give you mine. I forgive you for not answering every call. I forgive you for walking away when I needed you to stay. I forgive you for winning. Because none of that was really about you. It was about a version of myself I couldn't bear to look at. And when I finally did, when I stared her in the eyes here in the silence of this place, I saw how scared she was, of being unloved, of being invisible, of you becoming more than me. And now I see what Mom saw. You weren't more. You were ready. Ready to hold what she was too afraid to give me. Ready to tell the truth even when it burned. Ready to lose me if it meant you didn't lose yourself. I couldn't do that. But I'm trying now. The mural is done. I painted your hands in gold, pressing light into a crack. People don't know it's you, but I do. Thank you for not becoming me. Thank you for protecting the part of me I didn't know how to guard. I love you. And I let you go. Lindsay. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there. Still. Empty but not hollow. I read the letter twice. Then a third time. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened my email. Started a reply. But I didn't write to her. I wrote to the director of St. Margaret's. Please let Lindsay know her letter was received. No reply is needed. But tell her this: she is not invisible, she never was, and the mural is beautiful. Later that day, I walked to the fridge. Took down the first photo she ever sent me, the one of us on the tire swing. And replaced it with a new one. A printout of the mural. Cracked wall, two golden hands. Hope pressed into brokenness. Not a fairy tale. Not a redemption arc. Just proof that what is broken can still be held. That night, I curled up in bed and whispered her name into the dark. Just once. Just enough. Then I let the quiet wrap around me like an old, worn quilt, stitched with grief and loss, and love that never found its way back. And I slept. Finally. Without holding my breath. I didn't plan to see her again. After that last letter, I thought the chapter had closed, not neatly, but fully. I'd made peace with the silence. I'd made space for it. But peace, I've learned, doesn't mean stillness. Sometimes it's a slow, steady shifting, like tectonic plates beneath your feet, moving whether you notice or not. And one afternoon I noticed. It was a Sunday, early spring. I was walking through a local book fair at Pioneer Courthouse Square. Couples brushed shoulders with strangers. Children ducked between stalls. And as I passed a table lined with poetry zines, a familiar voice rose from somewhere behind me. And sometimes, we are not the hero of the story but the echo. I turned. And there she was. Lindsay. Standing on a small pop-up stage, reading from a thin journal, her voice clear and quiet. She looked different. Not because of a haircut or clothes or age. But because she no longer stood like she needed to be admired. She stood like someone who finally knew how to carry her own weight. I stood there frozen. Not in fear. In recognition. After she finished, the crowd applauded politely and dispersed. She stepped off the stage, collecting her notes, unaware that I was still standing there. And then she looked up. Our eyes met. She didn't flinch. Didn't cry. Didn't smile. She just waited. As if to say, if you want to leave, you can. If you want to stay, I won't stop you. I walked toward her slowly. Each step peeled a layer of something off me, not pain exactly, just old armor. When I stopped in front of her, she whispered, "You came." I nodded. I didn't know you'd be here. Neither did I said. I guess we're both learning to show up. We stood there, surrounded by people and music and warmth. No lawyers. No letters. Just us. Lindsay looked down at the copy of her journal in her hands and held one out to me. I took it. The cover read, "Sisters like fault lines." Inside the dedication. For the girl who told the truth even when it cracked the ground open. You showed me the map, I crawled the rest of the way. I closed the book. Held it to my chest. You still writing? She asked, her voice hesitant. I nodded, finished the book. Her eyes widened slightly. You really wrote it. Inheritance, I said, not just the money kind. She smiled, small and broken and beautiful. You'll change people with it. I didn't say thank you. Didn't have to. We walked for a while. No plan. No destination. Just two women walking through Portland as the sun dipped lower, casting everything in a soft, forgiving gold. We talked about things that didn't hurt, art, music, old memories that didn't sting anymore. And then we talked about Mom. How did she know? Lindsay asked suddenly, voice tight. How did she see who we were going to become before we even became it? I shrugged. Maybe she didn't, maybe she just hoped we'd find our way, eventually. I was awful to her, Lindsay said, to you. I know. She looked at me. And I said, but I'm not here to relive it. I'm here because I chose to be. She swallowed hard. You always had that in you. No, I said, I just stopped pretending I didn't. When we reached the end of the block, she stopped. This is as far as I go, she said. They're picking me up soon. I nodded. She hesitated, then asked, will I see you again? I looked at her, not as my sister, not as my enemy, not as my past. Just as a woman doing the hard work of becoming human again. Maybe, I said, but I don't need to. She blinked, confused. And I added, because I've already seen you, finally, clearly, and that's enough. Her face crumpled just for a second. Then she smiled through it and turned away. That night I sat at my desk and opened a new journal. Wrote a single sentence at the top. We are not the worst things we've done. We are what we choose to carry and what we choose to let go. Then I tucked her book beside Mom's journals on my shelf. Lit a candle and let the quiet settle. Not like a weight. Like a companion. Not someday. Not decades from now. But now. In the quiet after everything, after the rulings, after the letters, after the reckoning, I found myself staring at a blank document one evening with that question echoing through my body. I wasn't dying. I wasn't afraid. But I had lived through a kind of death, the death of who I used to be. And that version of me had left no instructions. So I started to write my will. Not because I needed to. Because I wanted to. I sat in my little studio apartment, the window open to the cool Portland air, and typed the header. Last Will and Testament, Melissa Lynn Waverly. It felt surreal. But it also felt right. I wrote slowly. Carefully. Not just about my bank accounts or artwork or the little collection of design books I'd hoarded over the years. But about meaning. I wrote, to the niece or stranger or student or friend who reads this someday, I hope you never wait for disaster to decide what your life is worth. Don't let others write your name in a language that doesn't belong to you. I designated part of my inheritance, what was left of Mom's money and what I'd earned since, to fund a microgrant for women recovering from familial betrayal. Not for legal fees. For starting over. First month's rent. New laptops. Seed money for creative businesses. I named it after Mom. The Alina Light Fund. Because even when she was fatting, she glowed. I cried when I typed that part. Big ugly healing tears. Then I wrote a letter. To Lindsay. I had no idea where it would go. If it would ever be read. But some things are written not to be received, but to be released. Lindsay. If you're reading this, then I'm gone. But I need you to know. I never stopped believing that there was a version of you who could have stood beside me, not behind, not against. We didn't get to grow old together, but we grew. And that counts. I forgave you not because you asked, but because I needed to be free. I loved you in the only way I knew how. And I let you go. That was my gift to you. And writing this will, that's my gift to me. I printed it. Folded it. Sealed it. And placed it in the fireproof box with my passport and birth certificate. The next morning I walked downtown and met with a lawyer, a woman named Giselle with kind eyes and no pretense. I handed her the packet and said, I want this filed, but I don't want to talk about death. I want to talk about clarity. She smiled. I wish more people said that. Later that afternoon, I treated myself to a meal at a quiet cafe near the river, the kind of place I once felt too guilty to enjoy alone. I ordered a glass of wine, took out my sketchbook, and began to draw my next home, not the literal one. The internal one. The one with high ceilings and no hidden rooms. The one where I was the only one with keys. That night I dreamt of Mom. She was sitting in the garden behind our old house, brushing her hands over the lavender bushes she used to tend with devotion. You finally wrote it, she said. I nodded. Was it hard, she asked. Only the part where I forgave myself. She looked at me then, soft, proud, not surprised. Then said the thing she used to whisper when I was little and scared of the dark. You're safe now, baby. I woke up crying. But this time I smiled through it. Writing that will change something in me. Not because it gave me control, but because it reminded me I had always had it, I just didn't believe I deserved to use it. Now, I was building my life not as a reaction to pain, but as a response to possibility. Every decision was a new line in my own legacy. Every quiet evening a page. Every act of care for myself, for others, a chapter. And someday someone will read what I've written in word, in work, in the way I held my own sorrow and didn't flinch. And they will know. I didn't just survive. I authored my survival. It was a Saturday morning. The first in a while where I woke up without feeling like I was behind on something, emotionally, financially, spiritually. No court date looming. No email from a lawyer. No letter from Lindsay. Just birdsong outside my window and a half-finished book on my nightstand. I lay there for a long time, wrapped in sunlight and soft sheets, wondering how long it had been since I felt like I was living after the story, not in it. That's when I knew. The past had finally become just a story. Not a ghost. Not a wound. Not even a scar. Just something that happened. And then passed. That afternoon, I opened a folder on my laptop labeled Journal Before After. It was where I had dumped all my thoughts during the chaos, voice memos, emails to myself, half-written confessions and grief storms typed at 2 a.m. when sleep felt like betrayal. I hadn't touched it since the court decision. I didn't even know what I was looking for. But I opened the first file anyway. My voice, brittle and exhausted, spoke through the speakers. I don't know who I am without this fight. I'm terrified that when it ends, I'll vanish too. I paused the playback. Then I closed my eyes. And I whispered aloud to the woman I had been in that recording. You didn't vanish, you arrived. I didn't delete the file. I didn't need to. Instead, I moved the entire folder into a new archive on my drive. Renamed it. Storm passed. That act, small, unceremonious, felt like lighting a candle in a dark church. Not loud, but holy. Later I went for a walk downtown. The city was alive with weekend energy. Farmers' market booths lined the streets, music echoed from buskers in the square, and kids danced through sidewalk chalk obstacle courses like nothing in the world could break them. I stopped at a flower stand and picked out 2 bundles, sunflowers and lavender. The woman at the stand smiled, for someone special. I nodded. One for my mother, I said. And the other. I thought for a moment. Then said, for the woman I'm still becoming. I walked them to the waterfront. Sat on a bench overlooking the water, both bundles in my lap. And I spoke softly into the wind. Mom, I kept my promise, I told the truth, I didn't run, and I didn't become what she said I was. The sunflowers I laid gently on the bench beside me. The lavender. I held it a little longer. And then, just before leaving, I tucked a small sprig into my coat pocket. Carried it home with me. Because some parts of your past, you should carry them. Not to relive, but to remember who you had to become to survive them. That night I cooked a meal from scratch. Set the table just for myself. Poured wine into a real glass, not a chipped mug. Put on music I hadn't played since before the storm. And then I sat. Not as someone recovering. Not as someone broken. As someone rebuilt. After dinner, I opened my new manuscript, the one I'd been working on quietly between everything else. Title reclaimed. The subtitle. How I took my name back. I'd written 4 chapters already. The 5th one was titled The Day I Did Flinch When I Said Her Name. I wrote for hours. Tears came at times, not from sadness. From recognition. Because the story I was writing now. It didn't end with court decisions or final letters. It ended with me waking up and choosing to live without armor. Every day. Even when it hurt. Especially then. Before bed, I passed by the fridge and looked at the mural print Lindsay had sent. The one with the 2 gold hands pressing light into the crack. I smiled. Not at her. At us. Not for what we'd lost. But for what we'd somehow miraculously salvaged. And then I whispered something I hadn't said in years. We didn't win, but we didn't lose either, we just became. 1 year after the ruling, I stood on a small stage at the Waverly Women's Recovery Foundation Gala. A simple podium, a simple room, 50 chairs filled. No press, no performance. Just people. Women who had clawed their way out of legal abuse, financial manipulation, generational grief. Women who knew what it was like to be dismissed, to be silenced, to have their names twisted into weapons. And somehow, I had become someone they wanted to hear from. Not because I was perfect, but because I didn't pretend to be. I stood there, my hands lightly trembling against the podium, heart thudding beneath my dress. I looked out at them, not at Lindsay, who wasn't there, not at the board members or the donors, but at the young woman in the third row, the one with tear tracks down her cheeks. She reminded me of myself. Not me at 31 in court. Me at 11. Hiding under the stairs the day my parents screamed about custody, listening to love be torn like paper. That's who I spoke to. And I said, they told me the inheritance would change me, and they were right, but it wasn't the money that did it. It was the war, the betrayal, the reckoning. It was the truth and learning how to carry it without letting it crush me. What I inherited wasn't power, it wasn't control. It was the right to rebuild. And I used it. Afterward, as the room emptied and people clapped my back, I stepped outside into the spring air. And I breathed. For a long time. That kind of breath that only comes when nothing is chasing you anymore. The next day, I visited Mom's grave. Not with ceremony. Just a thermos of tea and a folded lawn chair. I sat beside her stone, the wind weaving through the trees. No flowers. No words. Just presence. After a while, I pulled something from my pocket. A single page. The final paragraph of my book. I read it out loud. I used to think inheritance was about what people left behind, but now I understand it's about what you choose to carry forward, what you build with the rubble, what you plant in the ashes. My mother left me with a house full of silence. My sister left me with a war. And somehow I built a home out of both. Then I folded it back up, tucked it under a small rock beside her headstone, and whispered, "You can rest now, I've got it." That night I came home and poured myself a glass of wine, lit a single candle, opened my window to let the air in, and I wrote the final line of my next book. Legacy isn't what we leave, it's what we live. I hit save, closed the laptop, and looked around my apartment. Sunlight on the floorboards, lavender in a mason jar on the counter, the mural sketch framed above my desk. No ghosts, no noise, just space. Space to create, space to rest, space to live a life not defined by what I fought, but by what I chose. That's the life my mother let me build. And I'm building it. Every day. With light in the cracks,